Welcome to Ruffing the Passer, the show where I talk football, miscellaneous stuff, and mostly football. I'm your host, Sam Ruffing, and today I will be giving you my preview of Super Bowl 56 between the Rams and the Bengals. Let's go. This should be a fun Super Bowl, the first ever Super Bowl between a fourth seed on the AFC and the fourth seed in the NFC. The lowest combined seeding to ever play in a Super Bowl from either side. Not to mention, it's the youngest combined coaching age ever in a Super Bowl, with Sean McVay only being 35 years old and Zach Taylor an ancient 38. I'd like to preview my game and give you my predictions, but first I'd like to thank my sponsor, myself. So anyways, how I'm going to preview this Super Bowl and make my predictions is by giving points to each team based on their offensive skill level, their defensive skill level, and their special teams, and that will help inform my decision. And I guess coaches, because that is kind of necessary. I'd like to start off with the most important position in the NFL, on an NFL field, the quarterbacks. And I'd like to pit Matthew Stafford versus Joe Burrow, two former number one overall picks for losing franchises, who both have named their teams after cats. Matthew Stafford, a disgruntled quarterback from Detroit, who has spent the better part of 11 years losing and making the playoffs only 3 times without a single division crown, was traded this offseason, or last offseason, to the LA Rams in exchange for two first-rounders, Jared Goff, and a third. He was sent to LA to help revitalize a team that has gone slightly stale in the playoffs ever since losing to the Patriots in the Super Bowl in 2019. And on the other side, we have Joe Burrow, a kid who's 25 years old, so not really a kid. A guy who was born in Ohio, who went to the Ohio State University, and had dreams of playing there and leading them to a national championship game, only to be benched by Dwayne Haskins, which in hindsight may not have been the best move for Ohio State, because Joe Burrow went on to transfer to LSU, where he had the single greatest season for a quarterback in college football history, throwing 16 touchdowns, going undefeated, and winning the national championship. It was amazing, unbelievable, and he led the Tigers to just probably be the single greatest college football season ever. Then he went on to be drafted by Cincinnati, his hometown team, where he's been looking to revitalize the franchise, and it didn't start off great last year, as he was injured only a few weeks into his beautiful young career. But he came back after tearing both his MCL and ACL, and has led his team to the Super Bowl in only his second season. An absolute miracle when you consider that the Bengals were the worst team in the NFL only 2 years ago, and now he faces off against Matt Stafford. So, who's had a better year? Who's a better quarterback right now? Matt Stafford has had 41 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and 4,800 yards this past year in a 17-game season, so his numbers are a wee bit inflated. But he has revitalized that Rams offense into a deep passing game, still a heavy play-action game, though. Lots of runs, very tricky, all that, but he has performed well. He's found a great connection with Cooper Kupp, who was a good receiver but turned great under him, but more on him later. And Joe Burrow has been also great, but not as good this year. He's had 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 4,600 yards in a 17-game season, creating a great connection with his former LSU teammate, Jamar Chase, who looked like a bust through the preseason, which forced me not to draft him, and has cost me because I faced off against him in my fantasy football championship, and that's basically the reason I lost. So sad. Anyways, those two quarterbacks have had pretty good years. and have been great in the playoffs. Joe Burrow leading the Bengals past the Raiders, but not a tough team, but then the number 1 seeded Titans and the number 2 seeded Kansas City Chiefs in KC, leading an 18-point comeback. He's had some decent games, he's had an interception here and there. Not the greatest stats, but I'd have to give this to Matt Stafford is the better quarterback right now. He has been phenomenal in the playoffs. I mean, he destroyed the Cardinals, who only throwing 17 passes for like 3 touchdowns. And again, against the Buccaneers, he lit them up for the entire first 3 quarters until his team started to crumble around him, and most quarterbacks would have choked in that situation. But no, tied with only 40 seconds left, he found Cooper Kupp deep, and he can just score like that, giving the Rams a win and sending them to the NFC Championship game and sending Tom Brady on to the retirement home. He also absolutely played brilliantly in the fourth quarter of the Rams-49ers game, with a hairy throw here or there, but he led them on a 10-point comeback and led them to the Super Bowl, so that's 1 point for the Rams. Now on to the receiving core. This one's tough because the Rams and Bengals have remarkably similar receiving cores. On the Rams side, we have Cooper Kupp, who is the best receiver in the NFL right now. He led the NFL in receiving yards, receptions, and touchdowns. They also have Odell Beckham Jr., who has revitalized his career in LA. I mean, with 5 touchdowns since he got there in Week 8, and being crucial in the playoffs. Also, they have a sneaky good receiver in Van Jefferson, who's had 800 receiving yards and about 5 touchdowns and is a sneaky deep threat as well. Now, is this as good as their receiving core earlier in the year? I wouldn't say so, because Robert Woods and Deshaun Jackson were definitely pretty good. Tyler Higbee's is questionable for the Super Bowl, however, so that's a little sketchy. But the Bengals have on their side Jamar Chase, who had 1,400 receiving yards, way too many touchdowns, like 13, on only 87 receptions. However, that's not to leave out T. Higgins, who's been also a sneaky good boss, going for over 1,000 yards this year and 6 touchdowns, and Tyler Boyd, who's been pretty similar to Van Jefferson, 6 touchdowns, 800 receiving yards, and is great from the slot. They also have C.J. Uzomah, who's an all-right tight end, but he's also injured, but I think he's more on track to play than Tyler Higbee. Now, these are pretty evenly matched receiving cores, I'm not going to lie. You know what? I'm going to go with the Bengals receiving core on this point here, because I think their depth is a little bit better. Like, they have more solid receivers. And if C.J. Uzomah's there and Tyler Higbee isn't, I'll definitely give that cadence to the Bengals. Now, moving on to O-line, this one's not even close. It's the Rams. That's a point for them. They're up 2-1 in the offensive category. I mean, Andrew Whitworth's been good, and he's 40 years old, a former Bengal, and the rest of the line's been fantastic at keeping Matthew Stafford protected. And the Bengals have not done a good job at protecting Joe Burrow whatsoever. I think there's the right guard for Cincinnati, Pierce, hasn't been awful. The Bengals let up 9 sacks against the Titans, so that's not even close. Running back core. Now, this is where I'm going to give this to the Bengals, because as good as Darrell Henderson, Sonny Michel, and Cam Akers are, Cam Akers fumbled twice against the Bucs. Darrell Henderson's okay. Sonny Michel's good in the playoffs, but the Bengals have Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, and Joe Mixon is one of the best running backs in the league, just on his own, and Samaje Perine's a good passing threat. So, I mean, Joe Mixon had 1,200 rushing yards and like 10 touchdowns this year, so I'm going to give it to the Bengals. That's 2-2, but I'm going to give the offensive category to the Rams for the fact they have Sean McVay coaching them. Zach Taylor is a former Sean McVay assistant, and he's also pretty good with the offense, but Sean McVay is just an offensive genius compared to no other. except maybe Kyle Shanahan, but even that's questionable. So that's where I give that 2. Now, so 1 point Rams offense. Moving on to special teams. For the kicker of the Cincinnati Bengals, we have Evan McPherson. Shooter McPherson, as he's called in Cincinnati. He has been dominant. He has hit so many game winners this year. And then in the playoffs, just automatic. I think he's 100% through the playoffs. He's hit 4 field goals in every game, I think, so far in the playoffs, which, unreal. Versus Matt Gay of the Rams, who's had a really good regular season, hitting 94% of his field goals, but he dropped off in the postseason and has missed at least 1 in the last 2 games, including a short in against the Tampa. So I'm going to give the kicker to Cincinnati. Punter is completely up to punter. It's the Rams and Johnny Hecker, who's averaged 48 yards a punt this year and is widely considered to be one of the best punters in the NFL. And yeah, but overall special teams, Cincinnati gets it. I looked up a stat, and the Rams are like 30th in special teams' play this year, and it's not good. So that's 1-1, and then defense, that one's close. But I think the Rams D-line has Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, Von Miller, a few others. I don't know their names. Sorry. And they have been unstoppable this postseason, especially Von Miller, whose career has been wasted in Denver, as much as I hate to say it. Not really, no. He won a Super Bowl in Denver. You can't say it's wasted. But he has come alive in the playoffs, unsurprisingly. And he is the last person to sack Tom Brady, which makes me so happy. For him, so yeah, Von Miller and Aaron Donald versus Trey Henderson and Sam Hubbard. Both 2 stud pass rushers. Unbelievable. The Bengals also have B.J. Hill and DJ Reader on their team and have been pretty good. But I'm going to have to give the D-line to, I mean, these are both stacked defenses. Let's be real. The Cincinnati Bengals have in their secondary Jesse Bates, great. Von Bell, good. Eli Apple, whose career has turned around since he's been in New York, which surprises me because I remember he wasn't very good. Mike Hilton, among others. The linebacking core is decent. LA has a secondary of Eric Weddle, Jordan Poyer, although I'm not sure if he replaced Jordan Poyer. I don't know. Eric Weddle, Jalen Ramsey. They traded away Kenny Young this year, which is a little weird, but they've been a good defense. I think I'm going to have to give the defense to the Rams, though, because of Von Miller, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Eric Weddle, all those stud players, Leonard Floyd. They've all been unreal, and against Cincinnati's O-line, it's not going to be pretty. It might not be pretty for Cincinnati. And so that gives the Rams advantage over Bengals 2-1. So time to make my prediction. Who's going to win Super Bowl 56? It's going to be the Los Angeles Rams beating the Cincinnati Bengals 30-27. Yeah, 30-27. Could be a good game, offense all around. It'll probably start off as an LA. Let's say LA takes a 10-point lead heading into the second half. Well, 10-3 lead. No. 14-3 lead heading into the second half. Where you watch Eminem, Snoop Dogg, and Kendrick Lamar and that other person do their work. And then you come back and Joe Burrow's re-energizes the team and leads them to tie the game late. But then Matt Stafford leads the Rams on a late field goal drive to send it to give LA their first Super Bowl since the Raiders of however long ago. This has been Ruffing the Passer. It has been a fantastic season. I hope you have all enjoyed. I will see you after the Super Bowl. Goodbye.